What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get
Running
to
gear.
it.
Braking system brakes in most accents in Russia are quite decent in efficiency, with ventilated brake discs measuring 241 by 19 mm at the front and drums at the rear. But European cars with 1.3 engine had smaller discs. The front caliper is with a floating bracket, a typical and quite working solution with good efficiency. It is only a pity that the quality of manufacture even of original spare parts was not the highest. With replacement of brake discs and pads on the front axle once in 30 to 50,000 kilometers you can put up with, because they are inexpensive. But the fact that after the first 10 years of operation and on the front axle and on the rear can jam any cylinder and leak anything, requires from the owners a lot of endurance, courage, and sometimes even the ability to pump the brakes in an emergency situation. After all, by the age of 15, the brake pipes were already guaranteed to rot. Rear drums on Accent are successful enough. If you do not buy outright China, change everything, including cylinders, and do not save on fresh brake fluid, there is a chance that the drums will bother you once in 10 years. But the ABS unit and the quality of its work is frankly unsatisfactory, and in many cars it actually does not work. The reasons for this are quite a lot. Most often the matter is in trivial failures of sensors, however, sometimes they occur because of the failure of the setting rings on the ball joints, and sometimes because of a violation of the gap between the sensor and the comb, but not because of the failure of the sensor itself or the wiring. ABS unit failures are also not uncommon, mostly due to failure of the unit's hydraulic pump electric motor. It stops working due to banal contamination of the manifold. In general, when buying an Accent, it is worth understanding that former stories about the complete absence of problems in the early years of operation are in the past, and now the brake system on most cars requires careful repair. Suspension. The front suspension of the McPherson type is very strong both by design and execution. Simple L-shaped arm with very successful silent blocks, replaceable ball and the rack itself, all this served more than 100,000 kilometers on any roads. It is a pity that it was a long time ago, and now most cars have a hodgepodge of elements of unclear origin in the suspension. But even in this case, the front suspension does not bother much, and everything is done successfully. There are many variants of repair levers. Even for the minimum 5,000 rubles you can find a decent variant, which will serve for a long time. But the standard shock absorber strut is weak. By 100,000 kilometers the car loses a lot in controllability and comfort. However, there are a lot of non-original substitutes, including quite decent, and for 10,000 there is a chance to find original or Mando. Rack supports are not eternal, but there are no special problems with their replacement. It is unpleasant that the stabilizer of transverse stability requires attention to bushings, and the torsion itself often wears out in places of contact. The rear suspension here is also McPherson. All silent blocks of levers are replaceable, and everything costs inexpensively. It is only a pity that backlashes and creaks on old cars are a rule rather than an exception. There are very few owners who change the whole rear suspension at once. The features of owning a cheap car. This is actually another important factor when choosing an Accent with mileage. After all, a cheap car usually also means a very economical style and maintenance, so you have to be prepared for the fact that the levers may turn out to be different on the left and right, the silent block, filled with silicone on the screws, and any element can be absolutely killed. Despite the fact that most of the small silent blocks and levers have a cost in the range of 400–150 rubles. Steering. It would seem that the usual hydraulic rack on a light car, what can be wrong here? But cheap seals of the rack and low quality of manufacture provide increased chances of breakdowns. Therefore, leaks and knocks on mileage up to 200,000, it is normal. However, the repair will be inexpensive if it is not necessary to replace the lath housing. In such a case, it is easier to buy a used rail as a whole, and there are enough of them. Transmission. Common problems. Not a very high resource of the hinge is not a big trouble, but it should be taken into account when buying. Sometimes it is possible to find rusty spline joints and even backlashes, but global problems on this generation of Accent are not observed. Except that on copies with automatic transmission it is necessary to check backlashes of internal garnets in differential. Manual transmissions. Unfortunately, the 5-speed manual gearbox that was used in most of the cars was not a model of reliability at all. Already by the mileage of 100,000 kilometers it began to howl with vibrations. And already weak bearings and weak housing are in the zone of additional risk also because of oil leaks. The most unpleasant is the failure of the differential bearing cage, because of which there is a chance of breakage of both the box body and the secondary shaft and the main pair. Thus used boxes on Accent in a small deficit, as the node from this generation is perfectly suitable as a donor for the next, where motors are more powerful and boxes are slightly lighter. However, prices for boxes are not prohibitive. For 25 to 35,000 rubles you can find a live one. However, the repair can cost less because the set of bearings is inexpensive and garage masters have already gained a hand on such repairs. Automatic boxes. The A4 AF3 series automatic transmission is very reliable. Most of its failures occur with very high mileage and complete lack of maintenance. Typical problems are wear of the differential thrust bearing, loss of pressure, and breakage of splines on the shell drum. In many boxes, the splines under the ball joints in the differential have excessive play. Very weak system of oil filtration at long intervals of replacement leads to serious contamination of solenoids and hydro block with wear products. And by mileage over 300,000 kilometers, the oil pressure starts to drop due to leaks and wear of the oil pump, but the box usually gets something else. Otherwise, this automatic transmission, leading its pedigree from Mitsubishi F4A21 box, is very convenient in repair, simple and reliable. Of the minuses of this automatic can be noted that it knows nothing about driver qualities and is not compatible with the fuel economy mode. Attempts to somehow reverse the situation and drive in modes limited to the third gear in the city some racers make, but there is no special sense in it. And fuel consumption of 15 liters per 100 on such a small car can be considered as a mockery over the purse and common sense. Motors. Common problems. A cheap car is entitled to very inexpensive spare parts, so the quality of rubber goods and most of the electrics has not gone much from what is in the old VAZs. So, radiator leaks, wedging retractor relays, timing belt brakes, it all happens on Accent. But the most part of problems still passes under the article consumables because it costs inexpensively. Gasoline engines. The main engine that can be found on the Accent in Russia is a 16-valve G4EC or its 12-valve version G4EB. On imported cars there is a 16-valve 1.6-liter motor G4ED, 1.4-liter motor G4EE and even 1.3-liter G4EH motors, which differ minimally from them in design. On cars of the first editions you can sometimes find a 1.5-liter G4EK. All these are Alpha Series motors, which are upgrades of Mitsubishi engines previously produced by Hyundai under license. The design here is from the 80s, cast iron block, massive piston, belt timing, multi-valve cylinder heads with hydrocompensators. Simple distributed injection and simple ignition with dual module. The main problem of these motors is the low quality of attachments as well as original timing components, which does not please the owners. And there are no problems with the intershaft camshaft chain on 16-valve motors. It properly withstands several belt replacements. And most of the owners do not change it until the howling becomes very loud. If for the target reason of replacement to take the divergence of phases, then the replacement of the chain should be carried out at a mileage of 150 to 200,000 kilometers, but by the sound it goes noticeably longer, and old motors do not lose much in the characteristics. Curiously enough, the stars on camshafts are replaceable, and all elements even in the original version are inexpensive. Stars, chains, and calipers cost within 1,500 to 2,500 rubles per element. But the timing belt and its rollers turned out to be a very problematic part. The motor is plug-in in all versions. Both DOHC and SOHC versions bend valves when the belt breaks, which makes the problem quite unpleasant and expensive. The recommended belt replacement interval is only 50,000 kilometers, and installation of expensive and high-quality substitutes, unfortunately, does not help. There is a miscalculation in the frequency characteristics of the drive, inherited from the Japanese ancestor and complicated by the Low quality of rollers and the profile of shafts. Exceeding the interval of 50,000 is frankly dangerous. Sometimes even the original belt does not live up to it, though such, fortunately, is rare. And careful owners change the timing once in 40,000. The procedure is simple, all the marks are there, the replacement does not require special equipment, and all the rollers and the belt itself cost kopecs, almost cheaper than on the VAZ pole. It should be noted that an important contribution to belt breakage is made by not very successful hydrocompensators in the valve train. Their regular tapping indicates that the timing drive is experiencing increased loads, and this will have a bad effect on its life. Hydrocompensators are strongly recommended to change preventively at mileage over 150,000 kilometers, torquing them in the presence of any extraneous sounds from the side of the timing drive, even on a cold engine, as well as a drop in compression. Original compensators now cost 500 rubles per piece, while German-made ones are at least 1.5 times more expensive. There are no questions, so it is to the pump and thermostat. They quite successfully withstand about 200,000 kilometers of mileage, cost inexpensive, and they are often changed in advance. The oil pump, on the other hand, is rather capricious. It is often blamed for the knocking of hydrocompensators, but in most cases it provides sufficient pressure even in oils with viscosity SAE 30. At the price of a new original pump in 10 to 17,000 rubles, it is sometimes changed entirely. Well, or rebuild, because all the internal elements are available for sale, and a set of epicyclic gears and the cover and elements of the valve. Replacement of the plunger and the spring of the pressure regulator is possible without removing the pump, and it is easy to do it yourself. It is no more difficult than replacing the oil filter. On engines with mileage over 200,000 kilometers, experienced owners recommend replacing the plug and spring preventively, without waiting for a drop in oil pressure. With all the described problems, the motor base, block, crankshaft and piston group have a good resource and certain full resistance. Easily tolerating slight overheating, infrequent oil changes, bad gasoline and failures of the engine management system. The motor resource of the piston group is 350 and more thousand kilometers, with progressive oil appetite from about 200,000. Liners sometimes fail earlier, usually it happens because of oil pressure sags and wedged plunger in the oil pump. The crankshaft is repair sizes, and Chinese companies produce crankshafts at a price of about 15,000 rubles. But in most cases, the case is bypassed by replacing the liners to the nominal size. The natural wear of the crankshaft is minimal. Diesel engines in Russia. There are no diesel copies of Accent on sale, as there is no experience of operation of these exotic Italian motors. The second-generation Accent style of operation today is somewhat reminiscent of the Jigguli of a couple of decades ago. At that time, the owners also argued that spare parts were sold everywhere and were cheap, and let the car drives worse than others, but any breakdowns can be eliminated as cheaply as possible. But with time, Jigguli almost died out, and Accent of Taganrog assembly successfully occupied a niche. It is a level above the old classics in everything, but it is also very budgetary in repair. And all spare parts are on sale and cost pennies. There is nothing complicated in the design. A pupil of a State Farm auto mechanic will cope playfully. And while these sedans were fresh, they were almost no trouble at all, having earned a very reputation that sells them to this day. But there's a chance that their era is about to pass, too. Counting the time and resources that go into a car can already make someone give up on buying or owning one. But for those who are not yet bored with repairs, especially with their own hands, the Accent can well be considered a working option. In conclusion, the Hyundai Accent II LC presents a compelling case for those considering an automatic transmission over a manual option, particularly when it comes to convenience and ease of use. With its efficient performance and user-friendly features, the automatic variant often proves to be the better choice for daily driving. Additionally, understanding the timing belt as an expendable item highlights the importance of regular maintenance to ensure the longevity of your vehicle. By prioritizing these aspects, you can enjoy a smoother driving experience and keep your Accent running reliably for years to come. Thank you for watching, and we hope this information helps you make an informed decision about your Hyundai Accent II.